China was so greatly influenced by the Han Dynasty that the Chinese people still identify as Han today. One of the more complicated histories is that of China, with its many discoveries and empires that came and went. Every dynasty and people group has an impact on contemporary Chinese culture, resulting in a complex and diverse society that still fascinates people to this day. From 202 BCE until 220 CE, one of the most influential dynasties was the Han Dynasty. In Chinese history, it was one of the longest dynasties. Don't forget to subscribe to Ancient History for fascinating insights into the mysteries of the ancient world and captivating historical narratives. Prior to this, the Qin dynasty governed, and because of its extreme oppression, the peasantry rose up in a rebellion headed by Liu Bang, who eventually won the war and was crowned emperor. Gaozu became Liu Bang's new name. Emperor Gaozu's priorities as a peasant were to maintain political stability and provide for the populace. This period, which is sometimes referred to as the Golden Age of ancient China, was marked by tranquility and permitted a great deal of inventiveness and scientific advancement. One of the most significant eras in Chinese history, the Han Dynasty is known today for its influence on Chinese culture. A large portion of Chinese society and culture emerged during this time. What political effects did the Han Dynasty have in China? The creation of the civil service was one significant political shift that occurred under the Han Dynasty. Prior to the Han Dynasty, corruption and an ineffective government were commonplace because government officials lacked the necessary training or experience. Emperor Gaozu chose capable, educated persons to back his administration when he initially came to power. Jobs came with salaries, and advancements were determined by merit, rather than bribery or family connections. The Chinese continued to employ the same political structure for nearly 2 millennia, up to 1912, even though they would eventually introduce exams for bureaucratic jobs. He did not, however, alter the political system right away. A decentralized system of governance was previously employed by the Qin dynasty, which divided the nation into regions and chose a leader to oversee each one. Though theoretically effective, the Han Dynasty soon found that it was susceptible to corruption. Despite uprisings, Emperor Jing, who ruled from 157 to 141 BCE, consolidated power and fortified the bureaucracy. Later, in 124 BCE, the Han government established the Imperial Academy, which taught pupils Taoist and Confucian texts. In China, there was a rigid social structure that prevented some people from attending school. Those who did manage to get an education, however, were able to enter the government and train the next generation of politicians for public office. The Chinese government was also reformed to adopt Confucianism during the Han Dynasty, which promoted morality, restraint, and fidelity to family. The Qin dynasty had previously made legalism its primary philosophical tenet. Chinese legalism holds that strict laws and punishments can be used by authorities to achieve their goals. Theoretically, individuals would abide by the laws in order to avoid punishment, but this did not always benefit the Qin government, particularly when people were expected to receive an outcome over which they had no influence. Converting to Confucianism proved to be a more mild leadership style, as it allowed people to concentrate on internal morals instead. Confucianism played a significant role in the longevity of the Han Dynasty and is now widely accepted in Chinese society. Despite their notable political achievements, the Hans faced numerous challenges, one of which was the Qin dynasty. Some historians even refer to it as an interregnum within the Han Dynasty. In 9 CE, Wang Mang toppled the government and proclaimed himself emperor, but his reforms were not well received by the populace, and he quickly depleted the imperial coffers. Though he was not a natural leader and would not delegate, Wang made an effort to put Confucian principles into practice. It's extremely ambitious to try to manage an entire country by yourself, yet he overlooked things like the government payroll. Eventually, the corrupt officials and mounting taxes drove the peasants into rebellion, and Emperor Guangwu, whom contemporary historians recall as one of the benevolent emperors of the Han Dynasty, returned to rule the country. Once more, Guangwu brought all of China together, but not before battling a number of other local chiefs and heir apparents. In the end, it took him to pass away before he was ultimately finished. Though he was not fond of combat, he frequently employed diplomatic methods and the threat of political titles to persuade local authorities to submit to his authority. Diplomacy could not win over everyone. Emperor Guangwu had to contend with the formidable Qing Dynasty. In 36 CE, he ultimately vanquished them, restoring peace to China. But even the Hans could not survive forever, and corruption had taken hold of the Han administration by 130 CE. At this stage, the emperors were more concerned with maintaining their comfortable lifestyles than with leading the nation. Generals and palace eunuchs wielded greater influence than the emperors. China's absence of a strong central government allowed for the growth of starvation, growing taxes, and corruption. The people finally rose up in rebellion just as they had under the Qin Dynasty. The Yellow Turban Rebellion lasted from 184 to 205 CE. Zhang Jue founded the Yellow Turbans as a religious branch of Taoism, but even at that early stage, he had political goals in mind. He urged his supporters to rise up by telling them that the Han Dynasty was coming to an end. As the violence expanded throughout the nation, other factions emerged, each with the intention of overthrowing the Hans or bolstering their own political ambitions. The generals' tremendous influence allowed them to effectively put an end to the uprising one area at a time. However, Zhang Jue was correct in one regard. The end of the Han Dynasty was imminent. One of those generals made the decision to seize control of China. After uniting the majority of northern China, Cao Cao marched south. Despite having a formidable army, he neglected to do a prior inspection of the area. Cao Cao was unprepared for the region's heavy muck and canal coverage. Eventually forced to retire, he was routed at the Battle of Red Cliffs in 208 CE by the other generals. The Han Dynasty was ultimately overthrown when the nation was split up into 3 kingdoms. The Han Dynasty had its share of instability and corruption, but it also had beneficial political effects on China. Even though the government would still require work in the future generations, they altered the fundamental structure of the government and established the civil service to sustain it. Although China's current administration differs slightly from that of the Han Dynasty, the political shifts made hundreds of years ago still had a significant impact on the country's development. However, the adoption of Confucianism was one of the biggest political shifts. The fact that this ideology is still widely accepted in China today demonstrates how the Han Dynasty's impact endures. What alterations in the economy did the Han Dynasty bring about? Emperor Wu's rule contributed to the peace and prosperity that characterized the Han Dynasty. For 54 years, from 141 to 87 BCE, Emperor Wu the Great ruled. His social reforms, which included granting legal equality to all and creating chances for the underprivileged, are what have made him most famous. Wu did accomplish other things too, and the Silk Road, which began in 130 BCE, was one of the major economic developments of the Han Dynasty. China to Europe was connected commercially along the Silk Road. Naturally, there were other east-west trade routes that existed before the Silk Road, like the Persian Royal Road, which was established several centuries earlier. This trading route was established by the Han Dynasty to obtain superior horses for their cavalry. Compared to previous dynasties, the Hans employed the cavalry more frequently and a greater range of crossbows. After successfully overthrowing a local king with Western horses, Emperor Wu started to wonder what more trade with the West may bring to China. During the height of the Silk Road commerce, Europeans sold horses, textiles, glassware, and other manufactured goods in exchange for Chinese goods like silk, tea, spices, porcelain, and precious stones. By the time Emperor Augustus ascended to the Roman throne, silk had become the most sought-after commodity in the West due to its widespread popularity along the trade route, particularly with the Roman Empire. It even provoked societal criticism because at the time, silk apparel was a contentious issue. Nevertheless, as the years went by, other items like paper, gunpowder, and spices had a big historical influence on the West. Additionally, the two groups shared inventions and ideas. That's all for this video. We will be back soon with another informative video. Don't forget to like and share this video. To keep exploring ancient history together, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Until next time,